All right. What's up, everybody? Sorry, looks like my camera angle's a little bit off here, but I was trying to rush and get things set up as fast as I could because, I'm not used to doing a live show immediately after finishing up the day job here, like 10 minutes afterwards and just hopping in. But it's emergency time, man. All I can think about today is just how the world needs to slow down, please. Like the sports world was going nuts today. Not just with all this, like Kevin Durant, it's like the world is going nuts. Like we have no room to breathe at all. But here I am, ready to give you an emergency pod slash YouTube live, whatever it is, about UCLA and USC heading to the Big Ten. This is all unfolded very quickly. Remember what it was like back in July of last year when the Texas and Oklahoma bombshell got dropped on everybody. This is the Pac-12's version. This is version 2.0, something that did not really have leaks until today. John Wilner, who is somebody that I've told you about a lot on this channel, really like the guy in the Pac-12, the Pac-12 reporter, San Jose Mercury News, Pac-12 hotline. He's the guy that drops the bombshell today about them leaving. And now we're to the point where I'm seeing reports. And look, things are going to happen very quickly here, I'm sure, on Twitter. Even as I move through this live video, latest I saw is that it could be totally official as soon as tonight. That these teams are going to be headed to the Big Ten. And we've seen plenty of reports that the Big Ten is potentially not done. John Wilner, in fact, was one who tweeted that out and said a source told him, don't expect that the Big Ten is done right now. So let's just hold our horses and see. Is it going to be Oregon and Washington? Like, what else happens here? Everybody is talking about this being now an accelerated pace to super conferences, to a totally different era of football. This throws a wrench into everything. And I guess what I'll say off the top here before I actually get into this, I think a lot of today is going to just be dictated by your questions. It's going to be more free flowing because I work a day job. So, I mean, I was following this as much as I could throughout the day, but I do not have full on organized thoughts written out for you right now. I mean, I'm basically just in the same boat that all of you guys are, trying to react and make sense of this on the fly. So, I apologize if it's not as organized as it usually is and what you would come to expect here on this channel. But you guys are free to hit me up with the questions. I will say this off the top, as I do every time. The chat, I'm sure tonight will be, or I keep saying tonight, I guess it's basically tonight. The chat is going to be pretty busy, I'm sure. If you want to ensure that your question or comment gets to the top and makes it into the chat, you can donate by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you can donate, support the work that I'm doing here on the channel. Working 10 minutes after finishing the day job to give you guys this live. That is how you can support what it is that I do and ensure that your question or comment makes it here onto the chat. So I'm hoping for a lot of those tonight just to help facilitate this conversation as we kind of all work through this together, because this is a wild time, man. Not only is the audience here a lot of fans of teams that have been in the Big 12 for a while, but we've got a lot of folks coming from the 4 schools that are not even here yet. And what is the future now for all of those schools, man? Like this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And I have to be honest with you. If I'm being completely honest with you, I know I saw a lot of the celebration from folks when this first broke, like Big 12 people that I follow, basically because like the idea here, and I get it as somebody who takes pleasure, particularly in the sports world, and like being right and seeing people that have harmed you or who you perceive to have harmed you have something bad happen to them. I understand the grave dancing on the Pac-12. I understand it because Pac-12 fans and media and everybody grave danced all over the Big 12 last year when this happened, and now it's happened to the Pac-12. And so is there a small part of me that feels that way? Yes, but that is not the overwhelming emotion that I felt when this happened. The overwhelming emotion that I felt was worry. I mean, I feel like, yes, there's a chance here for the Big 12 to pick off some teams from the Pac-12, and we can certainly talk about that. I think that opportunity is out there. But I think the main outcome of what just happened today is that the clock, whenever it was going to be or whenever it is going to be, just got accelerated toward these 2 super leagues, like towards or maybe one or a super division, whatever the end of this is going to be, with it being a total like semi-pro league and the SEC and the Big Ten being the only things that really matter. The timeline on that just got accelerated today. I just don't think there's any doubt about that at all. And so even if it's a short term, hey, the Big 12 is going to get a little bit stronger here in the short term, and yeah, we can grave dance on the Pac-12 and we can make fun of the Stuart Mandels of the world, who were really pimping out the Pac-12 last year at this time when everything happened in July anyway for the Big 12. We can do all of that, but I don't see how there's any other conclusion that this just made it closer to the end, basically, for total relevance for everybody else in college football. And the other thing is, it's just so uneasy. Okay. And this is where I have to balance my loyalties as both a Big 12 fan and somebody that's bringing you Big 12 content. And as you can see behind me, lifelong K-State fan. I mean, it's meant more to me than about anything in my life, to be honest. My K-State fandom, and grad of the school there, broadcasted, worked with the school a bunch, and still do some. So I feel very uneasy about that, man. I have no idea what the next domino is to fall. I said on Twitter, like, I think all bets are off. All bets are off as to what the next domino is to fall. Do teams from the Big 12 try to go off to the Pac-12? Like, what are the machinations of this going to be? Like, how will this actually manifest itself? I think everyone's drawing the natural conclusion between teams from the Big 12 and Pac-12 trying to link up, but I don't know, man. Like, how does that work? What way is that going to go? I've done many videos about here how, Kansas clearly has had eyes for the Big Ten for a long time. And I think they're finding out right now that they certainly were not on that first tier of teams that the Big Ten was interested in. That they're going to be looking for whatever it is. I've already seen a Kansas pivot where it's like, okay, now we go join the ACC, which is a whole other enchilada, because the ACC can't renegotiate its terrible TV deal unless they expand. Then it can be renegotiated. So is the ACC going to come trying to poach Kansas and West Virginia? Will Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, schools like that be looking west? Will they be trying to link up with the Pac-12? Like, what are the next moves here? I just think we just have a lot of instability now. And it was probably foolish to think that there really was any level of stability legitimately, even before this news broke today, but we had kind of been lulled into it. And so it's kind of rocked me, to be honest. And I don't know what to tell you to expect. I don't think anybody knows. We are back into the heart of realignment season, man. Okay. And I'm seeing donations coming in real fast here. So let me start getting through these. I appreciate all of you guys that are doing this. Juan is first up. Juan, thank you for being here once again after just talking to you last night. Juan says, go Cougs. The news worries me that the Big Ten SEC could poach some Big 12 schools now. If so, who might they even want? Well, there was one tweet out there earlier today that did mention a Big Ten wish list that I think it was like Washington and Oregon, and two of the schools that popped up on it were Kansas and TCU. And when I say wish list, not wish list, but schools that have been discussed. But the problem with this is we are right back into the season of every Jimmy and Joe with a Twitter account just throwing something out there and hoping that it sticks and claiming that they have sources. I mean, there was a guy out there saying today, sources, Kansas has discussed joining the Big East in basketball and going independent in football, which is a pretty ridiculous thought because of the financial aspect of that. So you're just going to see that all over the place. There's somebody out there pretending to be Bob Bowlesby. I had somebody throw a tweet in my DMs and be like, is this real? It was a tweet saying, hey, the Big 12's already added 4 schools from the Pac-12. I'm like, no, man. So we're into that. So I just don't know. I don't know, I guess, is the long and short of the answer to that. I don't know what the interest level would be from the Big Ten in any schools there. I would think my gut, like right now, honestly, there's been all this smoke about West Virginia and the ACC, or at least West Virginia fans certainly hoping that would be the case. But in reading Ross Dellinger tweeting out that, like, hey, the ACC is stuck in this awful TV deal where we're talking about USC and UCLA. It was reported today that they're expecting to be able to make over $100 million per year with their payout, which would be way more than what they're making right now in the Pac-12 once they move to the Big Ten. I mean, if that's the case, the ACC is stuck in the mid-30s for the next 14 years because of their TV contract. So they have so much incentive to go ahead and expand because that's the only way they can renegotiate their TV deal. So do they come get West Virginia? Do they look for a dancing partner? That to me, Kansas fans this whole time have been really fantasizing about the Big Ten. Getting an invite to the ACC there, makes a lot more sense from the ACC standpoint because of how much they value basketball and just the mere need to expand just to re-up anyway. Now, I guess the question then becomes, could they actually get more money out of that TV contract? But I would imagine that still with Clemson, Florida State, Miami, that they probably can do better than what has turned into a historically bad deal that they're in right now. So I just think all bets are off. All bets are off. And, going back to the reporting, who's the columnist from the Fort Worth Star Telegram? Mac Engel. Mac Engel had the report about like TCU and Houston, both being pretty high on the list of the Pac-12 at one point in time. I mean, is the Pac-12 going to try and be aggressive there? There are so many variables to this. Like George Kliavkov. Like now all of a sudden you have this commissioner who was hired from MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And, I certainly championed the idea just last night of the Big 12 doing something very similar. But now, unprecedented times for basically any commissioner. Not many commissioners have had to deal with this ever. There's not really a way to prepare for this. But now how do you respond? How do you respond and how do you prepare for this? For the Big 12, like August 1st was supposed to be the day for the new commish. Do you get started now? Like how? I don't know how this works. Like, what is Bob Bowlesby the one that's supposed to go out and be aggressive right now? I guess he's not going to get those Mai Tais on the beach anytime soon. I mean, long and short answer, I don't really know, but those are some possibilities that come to my mind anyway. All right, I'm going to keep rolling through these. Appreciate all of you guys who are donating. As a reminder to do so, make sure your question or comment gets on the chat. You can click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you do that and support me and the channel here and bringing you Big 12 content in an emergency situation here. Nighttime says, how the tables have turned. Big 12 fans glad they were left out of the alliance. Thanks again, Kurtz. Well, I appreciate it, Nighttime, because I saw that you said you won't be able to stick around here, but you're going to come back and watch later. Genuinely appreciate the fact that you showed up and put in a donation for me as well. Yes, the tables have turned in the alliance. I mean, look, there are plenty of funny parts of this to parse out. How many times did I tell you the alliance was basically a contract that was written on a Chili's napkin? They're having like an awesome blossom, and Kliavkov, Kevin Warren, and Jim Phillips all get involved in this. And then Kliavkov looks like a sucker today. I just read reporting right before this that was saying, I think it was from Ross Dellinger that at Sports Illustrated, that it was USC and UCLA that initiated all of this. The Big Ten actually did not go out and try to poach them, but it was two Pac-12 schools saying like, look, they're looking around like, man, we're not going to be making any money doing this. I wonder, because supposedly this started a handful of months ago, the discussions. I wonder how much of this is USC landing Lincoln Riley and being like, man, look, we've got this dude now. We're confident about where football is at. We need to go make this happen. We need to go take a big jump. We need to go get our finances in order. That's another thing I would just speculate about here potentially as to how it was that this started. But yes, the Pac-12 has a lot of egg on its face. This does validate. I mean, I've been trying to preach to you for a long time. The Pac-12 was on just as wobbly footing as the Big 12. And if anything, we can at least go to bed knowing that tonight, that was correct. The Pac-12 was absolutely on wobbly ground, both how they were doing competitively, the payout. I mean, it wasn't that long ago we got the story that they paid out, like $19 million for the last fiscal year, which obviously reflects pretty poorly on the conference when they didn't get as many games in. The Pac-12 has clearly been wobbly, and now somebody just delivered maybe not a total haymaker, but a pretty solid body shot. I mean, that's a pretty big body shot to lose the city of LA. And for the Big Ten, I mean, the bigger picture of all this is just how it accelerates everything toward the Big Ten and the SEC's domination. The Big Ten was already supposed to be getting a $1 billion deal. And another thing I've told you on the channel that's interesting to look back on now is everyone said that was going to have already dropped by now, that we would already know what the Big Ten TV deal was going to be. And I was like, what's the holdup here? Well, looks like the holdup was that they were realizing they may have the city of LA to include in a TV contract. So who knows what that's going to be now? I mean, that is going to be astronomically high. And like, I am very optimistic about, in general, what Brett Yormark would be able to do as far as a TV contract for the Big 12. But that was in thinking like, hey, let's try and keep up with these schools that are going to be at like $60, $70 million per year. Now we're talking about into the 100s. And it's just, I mean, that gap is going to be crazy, crazy high. Crazy high. All right. Outlaw of College Football. Appreciate the donation. Thank you, my friend. Again, if you want to donate, make sure your question or comment makes it onto the chat here tonight. That's probably basically all of what this is going to be. So I would get in now. If you have something for me, you click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. And that is how you ensure that you get in the chat tonight. Outlaw of College Football. Teams like K-State, Oregon State, Washington State, Wake Forest, Iowa State are going to be pushed into a modern day 1AA. Well, that's definitely my fear. I mean, that is definitely my fear. And a lot of this, as I told you earlier, my initial reaction was just fear for my alma mater and what happens here, because it feels kind of right back to where we were last year at this time when everything went haywire. Now, not totally. I think there's a better chance that something evens out here. And I actually saw, I think it was Christian Simmons, who's a UCF guy, saying like, hey, best case scenario here is that the Pac-12 goes out and decides to add like Boise and I don't know, a handful of other West Coast schools to kind of stabilize themselves. And then the Big 12 just stabilizes where they're at. I mean, yeah, that really might be, but I don't, all of the reporting is indicating. I mean, I was reading Brett McMurphy's story right before I hopped on here on the live, and he was saying like everybody's talking about super conferences, and that the Big 12 will probably be aggressive and try and go raid the Pac-12. And it just, all of that stuff just feels to me like all bets are off. You have no idea what is going to happen here. And so, yes, if I were schools like that, I would be very worried. I mean, I think the schools in the Big 12 right now that could feel a little bit better than everybody else, whether it's going to be that the Big 12 beefs up, and becomes a little bit stronger for the next few years, or they go find a life raft somewhere else. Obviously, I think it's pretty clear TCU's been high on that list. Kansas, obviously, because of the basketball program, the AAU status, will have more options than others. Oklahoma State, I think, by virtue of their football program. Texas Tech, being in such a large city out in West Texas with a very large enrollment, helps them. Who am I missing here? I mean, Houston was another one that, again, we saw the reports at one point in time being linked to the Pac-12. Maybe Houston has a little bit more appeal. And then West Virginia, which has always had that natural like regional tie-in potentially with the ACC. That I think is what you're kind of looking at as far as schools that would feel better. But everybody else, I don't really know. I don't really know. If I were anybody else, I would be definitely very nervous right now. And I don't mean to be like doomsday with all of this, but I'm just being honest. I think you'd have to be pretty nervous. R Webb. Oh, Baylor. I mean, I should probably throw Baylor in there just because of the success that they've had football and basketball wise here recently. I did not mean to forget Baylor. I think they're in I mean, think about how different the situation is now for Baylor than it would have been like 10 years ago. I mean, a decade ago, this is a completely different conversation for Baylor, but that's a credit to the job that they've done with their athletic department. R Webb, thank you for honoring my request. Yeah, you did slide in my DMs. R Webb was the one who kind of gave me a nudge. So I'm going to a concert tonight. I mean, I've got to get out of here by like 6:15 at the very latest to get to a concert tonight. And was hoping to just be a nice, relaxing night. Obviously, that's kind of gone out the window. But I was thinking like I could just throw together like an instant reaction video and put it up before I go. And R Webb, you guys all have him to thank. He slid in my DMs and was like, man, you have to do a live. And I started thinking about it. I was like, you know what? I could just hop on here at 5 and go and have it be an interactive instant reaction, which I think is much better for everybody. So he did facilitate that for all you guys. Michael says, thank you, Michael, by the way, Michael Goldman with a donation. Michael says, the Big 12 is safe. The Pac-12 is dead. Big 10 adds Washington, Oregon, Utah, Notre Dame. SEC adds top ACC teams. Well, I hope you're right. And I do think that I think there's a very realistic scenario where the Big 12 does add 4 teams. It looks like Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah are the schools being thrown around the most as far as that goes. Like, I think that scenario exists. But for how long? I mean, if Wilner is reporting the Big 12 or the Big 10 isn't done and there are going to be more dominoes to fall here, and everybody in the college athletics world thinks we're just accelerating toward the Big 2 super conferences, it's like, okay, yeah, that's great. But then at what point does the Big 12 still become fairly obsolete because of that? And yes, you can go add those 4 teams, but does somebody else get picked off somewhere else by another league? Especially if, there have even been, I think Nicole Auerbach said that it was a possibility that the Big 10 and the SEC could both be past 20 teams and like pushing up toward 25 and 30, maybe even. So, if we're headed to that world, like, I just don't know. I mean, I can't sit here and assure you that the Big 12 is in a great spot right now. I think they're in a much better spot than they were a year ago. I think ever since Texas and Oklahoma left, the Big 12 has made pretty much all very sound moves. And has put themselves in the best position they could possibly be in right now. But there's no way to totally assure yourself that you're safe or in a great spot right now. See, nighttime saying Big 12 seems safe. I mean, look, I hope you guys are right. I hope you guys are right. James, I see the donation. James, thank you very much, my friend. I do not see a comment attached to that, James. So if you had one, I'm sorry. You can try and get it back to me in the chat regularly. I'll try and look for that if you do have it, but I apologize if I'm missing that. Hank, thank you for the donation. Sincerely appreciate that, man. Hank says, I've seen a lot of people talking about the Big 12 adding Colorado, Arizona State, and Utah. If that happened, do you think the Big 12 would go to 4 teams of 4 pods or an East-West with 8? Man, I don't know. I think pods with 16 does make a lot of sense. I don't know how you would do it. And I think that's like one of those questions that like we'll just have to cross that bridge when we come to it. I think that bridge is pretty far away right now. There would be a lot of steps that would have to happen between now and then. I mean, I just heard yesterday, Gene Taylor, K-State's athletic director, doing a radio interview where he said that August was when they were hoping to have a decision made on divisions or no divisions and how they're going to structure everything in this current conference right now. I mean, think of how long it's taken them to get all of that sorted out right now, how they're going to do it. I mean, now we're talking about with a new commissioner, you know, you're playing like commissioner limbo right now with not having one in there full time because you don't get the new one in until August 1st and Bowlesby's on his way out. And it's still been a slog just to get to the point where they're deciding it now in August. I think that's pretty far off. But in general, I mean, I guess my general thought is that pods would seem to make sense there. But we shall see. Our web popping in again. Hey, Stuart Mandel, is the Pac-12 still a Power 5 conference? LOL. Yeah, not good for the Pac-12. I mean, that is one thing I think we can, I guess, assuredly say, like the Pac-12's days of having any chance to be like a real Power 5 conference are pretty much done. I mean, maybe they do pluck some of the Big 12 and they form a conference that way, but who left in the Big 12 is really replacing the city of Los Angeles and USC in particular. I don't think that's happening, and I don't think there's any way that Oregon is going to stick around with this. Like, Oregon will find a home somewhere else. The thing about the Pac-12 is that their schools are pretty close to being free agents because remember, and I've said this on the channel a number of times, the Pac-12's TV deal is the first one to like actually come up. Now, the Big Ten had been talking about getting a new TV deal done and it maybe being $1 billion and all that, but that's them negotiating well in advance. The one that is technically coming up the soonest is the Pac-12, which means that the grant of rights would be up the soonest, which that's the thing that locks everybody into conferences. So with the grant of rights coming up pretty quick, it's much easier for Pac-12 schools to get out right now than a lot of other places, particularly the ACC. So can you really see Oregon sitting around with this? Like they're going to want to play in a conference, even if it's Pac-12 leftovers and Big 12 leftovers? No way. No way. Oregon's not going to do that. So yeah, I think the Pac-12's days of being what anybody has remembered them as for the past 100 years are pretty much totally gone. Maybe I would put the Big 12 like has a little more fighting chance to still maintain some level of decent legitimacy to the rest of the college football world here. And I don't mean to say that to like run down the Big 12. It's the ACC, it's the Big 12 and the Pac-12 basically in the same boat here. I mean, another thing I've repeated over and over again. It's very clearly the Big Two and everybody else. And this is just a giant step toward that gap becoming even bigger. That's really what has happened today. So you know, I don't want to be doomsday guy. Maybe I am a little bit too much for some of you guys right now, but I had hoped that we were headed for a period of like 2, 3, 4 years, maybe of relative stability. Let the Big 12 get the 4 new schools in, have a couple of fun seasons with that, and just not worry about this as much. But this feels like we've just thrown some gas on that fire. If you want to donate and make sure your question or comment makes it in, you can do so by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you get your question or comment in the chat. It ensures that I see it. Let's see. Rob S. says, how much will this kill Pac recruiting? Who wants to commit to Oregon if there might not be a Pac in your sophomore year? Yeah, well, it's terrible. I mean, it's absolutely awful. Like Oregon. So you want to talk about an immediate impact of this. Oregon was supposedly the leader for Dante Moore, who is one of the biggest quarterback prospects. He might be the best quarterback prospect that's uncommitted right now in 2023. And he's competing at Elite 11. And Oregon supposedly has all of a sudden taken over as the leader for him. Yeah, if you're him right now, what are you doing? Because now it looks like this league is falling apart. There's uncertainty as to what, I mean, I'm saying here, Oregon's probably going to find a home somewhere else, but you don't know necessarily where you would be playing. I guess for Oregon, you could perhaps make the argument like they'll be able to sell that they'll be fine no matter what, because they've got all that Nike money. They've got the Phil Knight money. They've got the facilities. They have the brand. And I generally think that would be true, but it's not a great thing for their recruiting. And then everybody else in the Pac-12, man, good luck finishing up your 2023 class. Good luck finishing up that 2023 class. This is definitely good news for any Big 12 schools that are fighting head-to-head recruiting battles with the Pac-12 right now. I would agree with you on that for sure. for sure. Tommy, appreciate the donation. Tommy says, if the Big Ten and the SEC take all the big dogs from the Pac and ACC, then maybe the leftovers all merge to form a mega conference. Yeah, and that very well could be the case, that you get everybody else forming the best of the rest. But, this is kind of my point where I just cringe a little bit at that, because what is that league going to be? What will it mean? What are you going to do for like a playoff structure at that point? I don't even, there are so many questions. Like, we deemed that spot in the playoff as such a big deal for legitimacy for the Big 12. What is happening to that now at this point? Like, where does the playoff go? What is the landscape going to look like at the end of 2025 when we actually get there? And like, who, would that league like have a place at the table for the, whatever we're going to call the national championship? And then, speaking of recruiting, how do you recruit to that league? One of the nice parts about right now, everybody being on essentially equal-ish footing. We know college football's never been equal, but like equal-ish footing is, especially in the NIL world, we're seeing it more and more. Louisville jumps up and grabs a former Texas commit, right? You can go out and make a big splash and get a big commitment, because ostensibly the guys that are all coming there still would have a chance to play for the national championship. But now, if you're going to be in the big leftover conference, then recruiting gets tougher. The money gap is going to make it tougher, and we're just going to see that gap widen and widen very quickly, I think. But and then I don't know. Are you forming like a massive league where it's like the 35 leftovers from Power 5 all coming together in one conference? I don't know. I just don't know. Matthew, appreciate the donation here, Matthew. Matthew says, my man, is it more likely that the Pac-12... Let me see. My man, is it more likely the Pac-12, the Big 12's premium brands, or vice versa? Either way, I feel today insulates my Red Raiders from the group of 5. Okay, interesting take there on Texas Tech. I would think, there was a lot of smoke about Texas Tech to the Pac-12 when realignment was happening a year ago. I think Texas Tech is probably going to be fine, but again, we're talking about like, what level of fine is it? I think Tech is in that group of teams remaining in this league that would feel better than others. But what does that really mean ultimately? Because you're not going to be well, at least I don't think. Maybe if the SEC and the Big Ten are going to go really, really big, if we're really talking about getting to those like 20, 25 team conferences, then Tech probably does stand a chance of making it into one of those. But if the idea is that they're not going to be left in that like leftover conference, if there's a third like big leftover group, no, I think Tech still very much would be in play for that. But I would feel better as a Tech fan than I would at a number of places like myself with K-State. So I understand why you would be a little less bothered by all of this. But anyway, all right, we've got a ton of people in here. Let me tell you a couple things. One thing I ask of everybody, it's free to do this. If you can just like the video, just click like. That helps me out a bunch with the YouTube algorithm, a free way that you can support the channel and support the work that I'm doing here. You can also support by donating, which gets your question or comment up to the top, ensures that I see it, ensures that it makes the chat. You can do that by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something to make your donation, and pop your question or comment in there. Again, this is kind of a stream of consciousness. I've been working today and trying to pay attention as much as I could to everything as it was going on, as it was happening, as fast as it was. So I'm relying a lot on your questions or comments here as we move forward. Let me read you some of Brett McMurphy's article, his reporting for the Action Network. Brett McMurphy, USC and UCLA, members of the Pac-12 for nearly 100 years, have formally applied for membership to the Big Ten Conference. The conference is expected to officially add the schools by the end of the day Friday. The earliest they would begin play is in 2024. Both Pac-12 schools initially approached the Big Ten about joining, and negotiations became serious in the past few months. USC and UCLA sought the move in part because they would double their media rights revenue in the Big Ten compared to the Pac-12. The Big Ten is currently negotiating its new media rights deal, but the addition of the LA market would increase those substantially, a source said. And the Big Ten may not stop at 16, a source says. Notre Dame has long been desired by the Big Ten, but the Irish are contractually obligated to the ACC until 2036. Okay, so a point on that. And Notre Dame is a very interesting case here. Like, what do they do now? A point on that with Notre Dame is I saw, and I think it was Heather Dinich. Let me get back to my Twitter feed. Who said that Notre Dame would not have to pay like the big whopping exit fee that you would expect for football, that they would just be obligated to pay an exit fee for the other sports. So here it is. Yeah, Heather Dinich of ESPN says, a source told me that if Notre Dame were to withdraw from the ACC, it can play football wherever it wants. It would have to pay exit fee and grant of rights fees for its other sports. So that's a huge key. I mean, because that's going to be not nearly as hefty a price as it would be for football, quite obviously. So that seems to be good news for Notre Dame, depending on where it is that they would want to go. I mean, I know they already have that relationship with the ACC, but I would just think like this has to be the Big Ten now saying, hey, looking around at the landscape and being like, okay, now we just added this power because USC and UCLA came to us. What can we do next? Can we go grab Oregon and Notre Dame? Are we going to be able to take that kind of brand? Because now, I mean, think about the arms race between the SEC and the Big Ten. If the Big Ten has added all of a sudden like Oregon, USC, and Notre Dame in the span of this next round here. I mean, that's major ammo for the Big Ten moving forward. And, I mean, frankly, probably helps Notre Dame out a little bit. I think they're already getting a boost recruiting-wise from Marcus Freeman being the head coach, but that's more legitimacy to them if they're going to be a part of this like two-team race at the top of the college football world and be vaulted into one of the two really major conferences. I think that would actually help Notre Dame out quite a bit because they've kind of been stuck at this point where like they can recruit to a certain level and be pretty good, but they get blasted in the playoff. I would think that helps Notre Dame's chances long-term, actually. All right, a couple donations here. Zach, I appreciate the dono from Zach. Zach Llewellyn says more likely 2 to 4 Pacs leave for the Big 12, or B, the Pac-12 adds schools like Boise, UNLV, SDSU, Fresno, or C, mix of both. I think it would be more likely that schools leave for the Big 12. I do think that's the case because, again, it's not going to cost them much to do so, and I would imagine that they view it as a sinking ship, especially now understanding that Oregon, I would think, just has to be on the way out. Like, absolutely has to be on the way out for what this is going to be. I don't think they're going to want to stick around in that conference. The interesting part about it, too, is like, you know, the Pac-12, and we've heard this all throughout the realignment process, has always had this attitude of like culturally they wouldn't want to mix with the Big 12. Culturally, they wouldn't want to they feel like they're above these other schools on the West Coast and wouldn't want to add them. How much will the Pac-12 be willing to bend on that cultural stuff and fit stuff and, you know, superiority complex stuff now that their survival would be like quite literally on the line? I think that becomes a really interesting question here. How much is the Pac-12 willing to compromise? And how together does George Kliavkov actually have this group? This may be a scenario where we find out pretty quickly that what Bob Bowlesby did in hindsight to keep everybody together and add 4 teams was a much better job than what people gave him credit for. And that'll depend on what the reaction is going to be here from the Pac-12 and how good of a job Kliavkov can do in trying to maintain the status quo and keep everybody together. JC says, John, I was mowing and missed all of this. What does this mean for the viability of the Big 12? Well, let me first say, JC, that, well, 1, I appreciate the donation. 2, I admire the fact that you missed this. I admire the fact that you missed this all day because it just like consumes me. It's like every day I feel like something is popping off on the damn Bird app that just consumes my entire day. And this obviously turned into that. And it's stressful, man. It's stressful not being a school that you know is going to have a seat at the table. What does it mean for the viability of the Big 12? I think it brings it into question. I think there's a chance. One of them, I was talking with Derek Young, covers K-State. I do a podcast with him. And he said, I can see a scenario where this makes the Big 12 stronger in the short term, but lessens the amount of time that the Big 12 has at, you know, some resemblance of the big boy table long term. And that's about where I sit right now. I think there's a chance to go add some Pac-12 schools, but I think we have hastened the arrival of the era that we've all kind of been dreading and not wanting college football to actually get to, more of like the Super League sort of era of college football. So I think that to me is where I'm at right now and what it means for the league. But it also means there's just a lot of uncertainty. Maybe Kansas and West Virginia are going to be courted by the ACC now. Maybe some schools are going to go try and join up with the Pac-12, but they prefer that sort of brand and going out west and playing those games. I don't know, but I think you have to at least think that some of that stuff is back on the table now. So I digress, but appreciate the donation there. Matthew says, sorry, typo. I meant between the Pac-12 and Big 12. Who will post from the other? Will Arizona State and others join the Big 12, or will Oklahoma State and others join the Pac-12? Well, Matthew, appreciate the clarification there, and appreciate you donating to do so. Yeah, I still think, and I hope that this isn't just wishful thinking on my part. I still think it would be more likely that Pac-12 schools would take the life raft to the Big 12 because, look, we've been making the case on this channel all year that the Big 12 is really in a stronger position than the Pac-12 even was. And now you take away USC. I mean, I guess UCLA too, but it's like obviously USC is the big piece of it. You take that away, I mean, what is that league? It's already been fledgling in terms of what they're accomplishing on the field. And that was with SC, by the way, not pulling their own weight, some shades of Texas there. That was already happening with that. Financially, they've had problems. The Pac-12 network has been a disaster. Lots of things going wrong for that league already. I would think this has to be closer to a kill shot for that league than it would be for the Big 12 to have the apple cart totally upset again. But there are too many variables. I just think there are too many variables for anybody to feel great about that. But that's definitely my lean. That's definitely my lean right now. Because, you know, if you're the Big 12 schools too, if you think about that, if you're already in this position where you can say, we can just bring some of those schools here and we're not going to have to worry about paying for all of our Olympic sports to go out to the West Coast and have to deal with all the travel and different culture and that thing. You can still maintain like a piece of your culture and what you have established here in the Big 12 while adding some of those schools and not having to make as many crazy road trips and things of that nature. So I would think logic would point you toward it is more likely that the Big 12 goes that route. But will the Big 12 actually do that? I mean, the question for the conference has always been, can you be aggressive? Be aggressive. Can you do that? And most of the time, the league's answer has been no. But now we're in totally unprecedented territory as far as that goes, because you have an outgoing commissioner in Bowlesby. You have an incoming commissioner who seems aggressive as hell in Brett Yormark, but he's also not on the job yet. And there's talk about, learning curve and all of that and taking over the job. And he still isn't getting there for another month. So I don't know what the league does. Like, this will be a fascinating day to be a fly on the wall in the league office. I have no idea what they're thinking. There is a note here in the Brett McMurphy story. So let me read you that about the Big 12. It says the Big 12 could add Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado, along with new members BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF to get to 16 after OU and Texas leave for the SEC. Here's a quote from a source from Brett McMurphy. It says, quote, the Big 12 has never been aggressive in conference realignment, but they should contact those 4 Pac-12 schools and tell them come on board because there's nothing left in the Pac-12. So there's at least been some level of reporting or some level of speculation from that by like industry sources within Brett McMurphy's circle. So, people are pointing toward that. I think you need to go make that attempt. You need to be aggressive, but who is on the other line of that phone call? Is it Bowlesby that's making that call? Is it Yormark? Like, I don't know. I would imagine it would be Bowlesby for right now, considering he's still like, maybe it's like a conference call between both of them. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much Yormark has to finish up at Rock Nation. Like, is Rock Nation just going to be like, oh, hey, man, we understand. We'll just let you out of your responsibilities here before you actually leave. Who knows, dude? I have no idea. Bowlesby, I will say, the good news is Bowlesby acted very quickly and aggressively and, swiftly in getting the 4 new members in that he did after he got the wool pulled over his eyes by Texas and OU. So that at least would indicate to me that there's a chance that the Big 12 can pull this off and go be very aggressive. Jordan, appreciate the donation. Jordan says, can Yormark start immediately? This is so much more fun than last summer. Cheers, John. Well, hey, I'm glad you're having fun, Jordan. I don't know how much fun I am having. This is all a little bit stressful for me once again, but it does spark a lot of really interesting discussion, and it is better to be not the league that is the laughing stock like the Pac-12 is right now. It is better to be not the league getting trampled on like the Pac-12 is right now. It's a guarantee that the Pac-12 just took a major blow. There is no guarantee that the Big 12 just took a major blow today. So yes, it is still in that regard a better situation than what the Big 12 was in last year. No doubt about that. I see Trevor in the chat saying, Kurtz, is this real news? Yes, this is absolutely real news. This is not fake at all. This is 100% real. Been confirmed by everybody. In fact, one tweet that I can read you because I caught it when I was going back through my timeline a second ago, from Adam Rittenberg. It says sources, Big Ten presidents and chancellors are meeting at 6:00 Eastern, which would be like right now. where they are expected to vote to approve USC and UCLA as new members. I'm told the interest came from USC, UCLA side. Big Ten wasn't seeking new members, but it's hard to say no. I can just check and do a little scroll through my timeline here and see if we've seen anything else come out of that yet. Oh, here's more from John Wilner. I should probably just keep John Wilner's timeline up right now. Wilner says, regarding more expansion, Big Ten schools with LA would generate 100 million plus in annual media revenue. Any additions would have to be seen as revenue additive by Fox and the 16 members. Very high bar. Okay, so that brings a different piece to this. Wilner had earlier said, don't think the Big Ten is done, and that was from a source. A source said, don't think the Big Ten is going to be done and just stick here. That is much more like, hey, maybe the Big Ten does calm down now. Because, there is a point where it's like, okay, financially, it has made sense to add these schools, but you can't just be cutting the pie different ways and cutting the pie more ways. And is the Big Ten have to maximize their per team value for right now? Notre Dame would be one that I'm sure would add value. And so if they can negotiate their way into Notre Dame, that's one I don't think the Big Ten would pass up at all. And then if you're going to add one, you probably have to add somebody else. But if you're getting Notre Dame, I would think there'd be enough value there. But that may bring into question, people who have speculated about, okay, like Oregon and Washington would just be up next. I don't think they're going to clear that bar to keep you at over 100 million plus per team in annual media revenue. So there's that. I see that Wilner posted an article too about survival scenarios. I will get to that in just a moment. Let me remind you again, and I see Christian's donation. I'll get to your question, Christian, here in just a second. But if you want to donate and make sure your question or comment gets in, we've got 600 people here in the chat. So if you're going to get that question or comment in to me, you're going to need to donate to do so by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That will pin it up at the top for me and ensures that I do get to it. Plus, supports the work I'm doing here on the channel, bringing you an emergency YouTube here right after the old day job ended at 5 o'clock today. Christian says, any risk of the new additions to the Big 12 bailing, or are they locked in? That is actually an area that I don't know what the particulars of that would be. I don't know like how the contract works in terms of like how committed they are. I mean, we saw that it's finalized and official that they are going to be joining the league in 2023, but are they subject then to the same, like, is the grant of rights in effect there? Would it only be going into, obviously it would only be going until the same time that Texas and Oklahoma's would to 2025. What would the charge be? Like financially, what would it cost? I think that's really that's the question. Financially, what would it cost? How locked in are these schools financially? And to be completely honest with you, I do not know the answer to that. And that is a great question for a big J journo. That is a great question for one of the great journalists in the Big 12 conference to go figure out right now that I would love to see. So I think you raised an excellent question there, Christian. And Houston would be one of those schools that I would wonder about because, there have been speculation about them to the Pac-12 before. It seems like most, BYU seems so happy to be in a conference, but then here is another angle to this in talking about Pac-12 survival. Do they go after BYU, which, for a long time, I think BYU has wanted to be in the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 has always thumbed its nose at a religious school. Would they, in the interest of their survival now, go actually make that move and take BYU? That is a question that I have not discussed yet here in this chat that I've seen some speculation about. I think that would be very interesting. And then where would BYU's loyalties lie as far as that goes? Would they be loyal to the Big 12? And this has been a school that's been an excellent partner for the league so far by saying, hey, we'll continue to play these late games. We'll continue to do the 8:30 kickoffs, whatever it is that we need to do. They seemingly have been very gracious at every step here since joining the Big 12. Would they be willing to ditch all of that to go to the Pac-12 because it would make a little bit more sense regionally, and it's something that they've always really coveted? I don't know the answer to that. So that would be, in regards to your question about how worried should we be about those schools and how locked in are they, I would wonder about BYU as well with the Pac-12 and how the Pac-12 would view that. Unfortunately, I was really hoping that I would be able to read this article from John Wilner. I might just have to. You have to register, okay? You have to register to read this article. So let me try and do it here real quick. Throw in the old email address. It looks like I can read it if I just register? Oh, hey, I can. How about that? All right. We're good. We're in, guys. We're in. We broke the paywall live on the stream. This is a first. Broke the paywall. Okay, survival scenarios here. Can it exist as a 10-school entity? Should it expand? Is a merger possible? It says, first, to be clear, when it comes to conference realignment, nothing is done until it's done, and sometimes not even then. USC and UCLA have yet to utter a public peep, nor is the Big Ten. But if we presume the move becomes official, there are a slew of scenarios to consider. Will Oregon and Washington attempt to join the Big Ten as well? The success of their football teams make them potential targets. UW also brings a significant media market and academic bona fides. For scheduling purposes, the Big Ten might determine it's better off with 4 West Coast schools. Of course, its media partners have to agree. What happens to Cal and Stanford? The California Four, which has served as the heart of the big Pac-12 for eons, is no more. The Bears and Cardinal excel at Olympic sports, but neither possess the football credentials to be considered must-haves if the Big Ten intends to take in more schools. Abandoned by their partner, USC for Stanford, and their sister, UCLA for Cal, the Bay Area schools most likely will remain in the reconfigured Pac-12. Could the 4 corner schools be next? Arizona and Arizona State joined the Pac-12 in 1978, while Utah and Colorado came aboard in 2011. Without the connection to Southern California provided by SC and LA, the quartet could look for options together. The best of those might be the Big 12 to create a league that owns the Central and Mountain time zones. But this development is extremely damaging for all 4 of those schools, given their reliance on Southern California for recruiting and on the LA schools as prime sources of TV revenue. Okay, so an interesting point raised there. If you are Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, or Colorado, they apparently, and this is where I mean, that makes sense logically, but I haven't followed Pac-12 recruiting enough to know that, but they have relied quite a bit upon having that Southern California connection for recruiting. But I mean, if that's gone, like if it's already gone with USC and UCLA being gone, I mean, you've already taken a hit there. So look, Colorado's recruited by playing in the Big 12 before and been very successful. I mean, how much success has Colorado had since they joined the Pac-12? I mean, if they're relying on LA for recruiting, it sure as hell is not doing them much good right now because they've been dreadful for the most part in the Pac-12. So something to consider there too. Now, here's I think some of the meat of the story. Are there expansion options available? Yes, there are several, but none of them are ideal. The Pac-12 could add the top-tier football teams from the Mountain West, such as San Diego State, Boise State, or Fresno State, but those schools bring little in the way of media value. It could attempt to poach Big 12 schools such as BYU, TCU, or Houston. Those are the 3 that I had mentioned already in this chat. But what motivation would those universities have to leave the Big 12, which is suddenly better positioned strategically and competitively than the Pac-12? The options are very few, in part because the paucity of football schools and major media hubs in the western third of the country. Is an outright merger in the works? 1 year ago, the Big 12 was in an equally dire situation, having lost its biggest football brands to the SEC. It reached out to the Pac-12 and asked about a merger, only to have the offer rebuffed. At that point, the Big 12 scanned the landscape and decided to expand. Now the Pac-12 is desperate. On numerous levels, it makes sense to seek a merger with the Big 12 that would give rise to a conference with 22 teams and span 3 time zones. But would anyone pay for it? The prime driver of conference realignment is the revenue generated by media contracts, particularly with Fox and ESPN. Wow. So he is speculating there about perhaps, I mean, it sounds like his idea there is that perhaps the best option for the Pac-12 at this point would be to come crawling back to the Big 12 for a merger. Now, I have to admit, that is the first time. A lot of you guys have spent today really grave dancing for the Pac-12, and my initial reaction was to be very uneasy. That's the first time where I've really had like the wry smile kick in and be like, oh, my. What's the Michael Scott line? How the turntables have turned. Yeah, because I do remember that. The Big 12 going out there trying to get some sort of alliance created with the, ironically, alliance with the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 not being very receptive to that, thumbing their nose at it kind of. And, well, now the Pac-12 is going to try and do that, I guess, with the Big 12. How would we feel about that? 22-team conference, the remnants of the Pac-12, the remnants of the Big 12. And I guess, I don't know, do you have it led by co-college athletics outsiders like Brett Yormark and George Kliavkov being the 2 guys to go co-run that thing? I don't know how that works. I don't know how exactly you would do that, but it would be very interesting. And I guess that would make me feel better, in terms of that's basically like your leftover conference that somebody asked me about earlier in the chat. That would basically be it if you had a merger with the Pac-12. Shoot, I just lost the last 2 comments here. Okay, JC. JC, thank you for the donation. Appreciate that, my friend. JC says, who are the remaining Pac schools should the Big 12 toss lifelines to? Yeah, I mean, again, the four, we've always heard the rumors about Arizona and Arizona State, which is all well and good. And like, I'm fine. If you can go, I think the incentive to go add those schools to the Pac-12 more than anything would just be to just bury the league. Just throw some dirt on it, man. Bury the rest of that conference, and take out one competitor there for you. But are you really adding a ton of media value with Arizona and Arizona State? I mean, I guess conceivably you're getting the Phoenix market there. I don't know how much that's really worth, but there has always been speculation about that those would be two teams that could be added. We've seen Colorado in the league before. Selfishly, I would just love the trip to Boulder, but obviously that becomes a natural fit because they've already been in the league. But what has Colorado done in the last 15 years on the football field to really add a ton of value there? You're in Denver, kind of, but how much does Denver really care about Colorado? I mean, Utah has been a really solid football program, but you already have BYU from the state. So I don't know. I mean, look, I would do it. I would do it in a heartbeat, but it's mainly just to kill the Pac-12. So I guess they're at the top of the list. I don't know. Theoretically, I guess you make the call. You make the call to Oregon and Washington, but I don't think there's any way in hell that they would actually be coming here. But they're certainly at the top of the list. And then, like, if we're getting into Cal, Stanford, no way that they're going to do that. No way that they would lower themselves to coming to the Big 12. That's way too stuffy territory out in the Pac-12 to actually have it happen. So I think that's how everybody basically arrives at those four schools being the most likely that the Big 12 would target. Tommy, thank you for the donation. Tommy says, for the BYU question, TCU had to pay an exit fee when we left the Big East. It wasn't a lot, though. Yeah, okay, that's good context to have, and that would be my guess, that like there would be some price to pay, but it would pale in comparison to like the Texas and Oklahoma stuff that we're talking about, where it would be north of $80 million a piece for those schools to leave. I don't think it would be anything like you're fully locked in and committed. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is like when TCU, West Virginia joined the Big 12. It took a while for them to be like fully vested in terms of getting the full media payout and all that. You had to go through kind of a transitionary period before that actually happened. So I'd imagine it works like in reverse, where you're not going to be fully pot committed to having to pay as much to get out. Long story short, I think it would be doable. I think the question that I got asked about it earlier was, how worried should you be about Big 12 schools, the new Big 12 schools jumping ship before they actually made the league? They could make it I think they absolutely could make it happen if they wanted to. I think that's very much a possibility. Our web says, Big 12 to the Pac, got 99 problems, but your survival ain't one. Hit me. Okay, that's good. Jay-Z reference there. Brett Yormark, coming from Rock Nation, Jay-Z's record label. That's good stuff. Our web. If anybody else has Jay-Z lyrics to equate to this situation, I am definitely down for it, man. Definitely down to hear that. Thank you for a good laugh, our web. Thank you for a good laugh. Okay. Taking a peek here at the chat. I would say maybe I can give you like 5 to 10 more minutes here. So if you have something, get it in now. This is like your 5-ish minute warning for the chat here. And it's mainly because I know that tonight's one of those nights where we could basically go all night, but I've got to get to a concert, okay? I got to get to my Taking Back Sunday and Third Eye Blind concert that I've been very eagerly awaiting for a long time. So I'm going to have to go head over there for that. But if you have something, you can donate by clicking the $sign below the chat box where it says say something, to get your question or comment pinned to the top to me and support the work that I'm doing here on the channel, bringing you a Big 12 chat tonight. If you are watching this after the fact, by the way, I forgot to throw this out earlier. If you're watching it after the fact, you can donate to the channel and support me on Venmo. It's John-Kurtz-4. That is another way to do it as well. Thank you for the donation, Jack. I see, Jack, your donation. I just see a sticker. I do not see a comment attached with that, but I appreciate that. Also, if you guys could like the video, everybody in here, if you could like the video, that's a free way to support the channel. Helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. Liking the video, one click, that's all it takes, and it does help me out. There's a little bit left in this John Wilner article. This is the Pac-12's misguided media strategy under former Commissioner Larry Scott created the revenue chasm that now exists with the Big Ten and set the stage for USC and UCLA to depart. In the Big Ten, they're expected to receive more than $100 million in annual payments from the conference, approximately twice what they might collect by staying in the Pac-12, which even that, I would have, for speculating the Pac-12 was going to get $50 million a year from that new TV deal. I don't know, man. I'm a little skeptical of that. But continuing on, how much would the TV networks pay for a merged Pac-12 and Big 12? Certainly not as much as they're paying for the Big 10 or SEC, not even close to that amount. But at this point, expectations must be ramped down. It's about survival. Time to call ESPN and beg for a lifeboat. Again, I chuckle because that sounds so much like what the stories were like at the time with the, remember that one of those stories, I don't remember if that was Dennis Dodd, whoever it was like, the remaining 8 schools in the Big 12 might only be worth like $9 million a year TV contract perspective wise. That's kind of what that takes me back to. Like, when it was everybody looking at the Big 12 and being like, your TV rights aren't worth anything at all. At freaking all. Ben, I appreciate the donation. Ben says, I think BYU would be enjoying this more than anybody with the Pac-12 now having to beg them. Yeah, I'll answer the second question here in just a moment. But that is true, too. As much as the Big 12 or some Big 12 fans could be sitting here like making fun of the Pac-12, grave dancing and all that, BYU certainly could, too, because, yes, BYU has gotten the Heisman, the stiff arm from the Pac-12 for a long time. And now here it is that the Pac-12, their best option may be to come and beg and grovel at the feet of BYU to try and desperately get them to join the conference. So, yes, BYU fans, you probably deserve to take a lot of joy in that if that is the case, if that's what's going to happen. It sounds like one way or the other. I mean, Wilner is speculating about the Big 12, Pac-12 merger being the most likely thing there that they would advocate for or try. And either way, it's basically the Pac-12 coming groveling back. Whether or not they're trying to pull BYU individually or as a part of some smaller package of Big 12 schools, or if they're just trying to merge with the whole conference, you're in a better position all of a sudden, BYU. So take a bow there. Take a bow. It took a while, but you eventually kind of outdueled the Pac-12. Ben says, Ben's other question was favorite band of all time. This is where I'm going to make people mad. My favorite band of all time, like growing up and through my adolescence and even into now. I mean, I still will listen to them some, but I was obsessed with Blink-182. Being a millennial, I mean, I'm as millennial as it gets. Born in '89, Blink-182 was my favorite band growing up. Still know way too much about them. My favorite musical artist now is Kanye West, and that is where I make people angry. And that's a whole different discussion for a different day. But I am what the kids would call a stan of Kanye West. So I do think I deem him to be the greatest musical artist of all time. But seeing Taking Back Sunday tonight, they were one of my favorite bands growing up as well. So I'm very, very excited about that. Alan, appreciate the donation. Alan, thank you very much, sir. Alan says, here from my honeymoon in Maui. Big 12 to the moon. Alan, big ups, man. First of all, congratulations on getting married, my friend. Congratulations on that. I need to get on that so that I can have a honeymoon and go to Maui. That dating thing, not always going real well for your boy here. But congratulations, Alan. Here from my honeymoon. Tuning in to the Big 12 live chat from your honeymoon. Can I give a shout out to your wife and just say, major trooper for allowing you to do that on your honeymoon? Like big time brownie points there to allow you to escape your honeymoon to listen to just a guy like me with a jawline sitting here talking about college football. So kudos there, and kudos to you, man, for popping in here. I much appreciate it. Wish you guys a ton of happiness, and thank you for hopping in on the chat. Viewer X1, thank you for the donation. Viewer X1, I'm trying to see if you had a comment attached here. Yeah, okay. Viewer X1, I see you say Mark Fiscarelli says KU to the Big East. I think that was the guy I saw earlier. I did not recognize who he was, so I don't know how much validity to put in that. If you guys know who he is and whether or not that's someone that should be trusted, but look, like I don't understand how financially that would make any sense at all for Kansas. Kansas has been sitting here eyeing the Big Ten because they're looking at that $100 million a year paycheck potentially. They're going to go independent then in football and drop any odds of that happening and just go be a basketball school in the Big East. I just don't know how that makes sense financially at all for Kansas. So I did not put a lot of stock into that. But hey, I don't know. So if I'm off there on like how legit that guy actually is, let me know. It looked like he had just a couple thousand followers. I mean, that doesn't always mean anything, but I didn't see anything there that really jumped off the page to me. Hoodie says, I just think the Pac-12 is done. Well, the future is uncertain for the Big 12. At least they added the teams that had some value in terms of profit. Hoodie, I certainly hope you're right. And I think a lot of people are in that boat today that the Pac-12 is done. I wouldn't, I mean, they're on life support. They're definitely on life support. I wouldn't stick a fork in them totally yet, but they are absolutely on life support here at this point in time. And yeah, I mean, the one debate about this, and I've seen this from a couple people that have, been like, did the Big 12 mess up by adding 4 teams instead of just 2? Because now, you could go be more aggressive and take more of the Pac-12. I don't know, man. I can't get myself into a lot of hindsight about that because at the time, you didn't know this was going to happen. You didn't know when this would happen. And the Big 12 is always taking crap for not being aggressive enough. It was clearly, I think, time to make an aggressive move. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it was the right way to go. Cameron B, appreciate the donation, Cameron B. Thank you for that, my friend. Says Big 12's in a good spot. Add CU, Utah, and the Arizona schools. Fortify the conference. Rock Chalk. Ooh, hashtag Rock Chalk. All right, Cameron, I appreciate that. I appreciate that you're a Kansas fan looking at trying to just fortify the Big 12 and move forward because that does not seem to be the attitude from a lot of you guys. So appreciate that. Minner 2050 says, okay, if K-State starts winning more, like wins the Big 12 this year in football, do you think they would get a look in a big conference? It depends on how big of a conference you're talking about. Depends on how big of a conference you are talking about. I don't think they're going any bigger than like the kind of leftover big conglomerate. And the unfortunate part of this is again why it's like, God, kills me that we're going through this again and having to be nervous and wondering about what's happening because like K-State seems to be really turning a corner as a program. You guys have heard me talk about that. A lot of people getting on board with them being a dark horse to win the league this year. And they're in the midst of their best recruiting class, maybe in my lifetime. Right now, July 5th, they're expected to get the commitment of Avery Johnson, a quarterback who's right now ranked number 6 in the Elite 11 rankings that are going on right now. There's a lot of good stuff happening there. And it's like, God, don't let this be the time where it all totally falls apart, man. Like, been waiting here right on the precipice of this. And Chris Kleiman has just grinded his butt off to get here. And now you're so close. And now like, man, is it really going to fall off like that? That would suck. That would suck. Cameron, I see, Big 12 in a good spot. Add CU, Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State. Fortify the conference. Good stuff there. I think I'm going to head out, guys. I've got to be over at this concert here in about 20-ish minutes. So I'm going to have to head out. But thank you to all of you who popped in here at an unconventional time. Usually I'm doing this much later. I wanted to make sure that we got some sort of instant reaction out about this and busted my butt to get here. So I appreciate you guys busting your butt to get into the chat and help make this happen. Spread the word about the channel. I mean, it's conference realignment season again, SZN, hashtag conference realignment season. So I'm sure there are going to be plenty of stories that break. I'm sure there are going to be plenty more emergency lives. I'm sure now is going to be a time where I'm going to be doing more like static content that's not all live as stuff comes out. So I will try my best to keep you guys all updated on this as we go, but need your help. Spread the word. College football fans out there, if you're a Big 12 fan or beyond, I mean, now is where the interest starts to go beyond because everybody's involved here in realignment. Spread it on social media, spread it in different Facebook groups, like all those Facebook groups you have, different fans of college football, fans of leagues, link it in there, tell all your friends, and continue to support the channel. I appreciate all of you guys who do that. If you're watching this again taped, it's John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you want to support the channel as well, follow me on Twitter at JLKurtz. If you want minute-by-minute updates on what's going on, I certainly will be on Twitter way too much, as I always am. So with that, thank you guys once again. Have a great rest of your night. Maybe things will slow down for a little while, maybe not, but either way, I will talk to you all soon.